Hi there, welcome back to the Community of Readers video blog. We're following the Old Testament readings for the Monkey Bar Challenge, and this week we're looking again at the whole of the book of Jeremiah. This is called Certain Failure. Well, last week in Jeremiah we looked at all of his geopolitical context and how that gave a bit of background, made a bit of sense of some of the things that Jeremiah said and did. This week we look more at Jeremiah the man. Of all the prophets, Jeremiah contains by far and away the most autobiographical information. We know much more about him than we do about any of the others. He was born to a priest from, I can never say the name, Anathoth in Benjamin. And right from a very young age received this calling from Yahweh. We don't know how young, but probably in his mid-teenage years. But the calling is really harsh. Yahweh basically says in chapter 1 verse 17, he says, I do not break down before them, or I will break you before them. It's like right from the start, Jeremiah is set on a consignment to conflict. And given the fact that his mission was so incredibly difficult, really a commission for certain failure, defined by conflict, is a difficult task handed to a boy. Now, Jeremiah really speaks in, I guess, in the vein of other prophets like Amos and Hosea and Micah and Isaiah to some extent. So this is about what people do, how they live. Justice must be done. Idolatry must be stopped. Faithfulness to Yahweh must be observed. These are themes that we're familiar with. But as we mentioned last time, Jeremiah is the closest to exile. And there's something about his words that carry a different kind of tone. This isn't warning. This is now judgment. And so, as you'd expect, the message doesn't go down very well. And Jeremiah faces really strong opposition from his own people. So he gets death threats, excuse me, a plot on his life. He's put in the stocks by Pasha, the temple priest. He's imprisoned under house arrest. He's thrown in a cistern. He gets real opposition from the group of exiles that had gone to Babylon in the first wave, where he suggests that they might be there for considerably longer than what they thought. They thought they were coming back very quickly. And Jeremiah writes to them and says, I don't think so. And he does not go down well either. And then in chapter 36, there's this just totally demoralizing moment where he's written down, or he's worked with Baruch, his scribe, to write down on a scroll all of his words, and then Jehoiakim, the king, burns them. And so he has to start the whole laborious process over again. So, as you imagine, this task takes its toll on this man. When he's in the stocks, he is lamenting the day he's been born, the task he's been given. He complains to the people in chapter 25 that he's been prophesying to them for 23 years and no one's listened to him. I can't imagine how someone is so utterly rejected and yet continues so faithfully, so doggedly for so long. After 40 years of proclaiming his message, the people weren't prepared to listen to Jeremiah. And when the Babylonian army were surrounding Jerusalem, King Zedekiah calls Jeremiah to see him and asks what should they do. And Jeremiah says, you should surrender. And Zedekiah throws him in prison for suggesting it. He listens to his advice and then completely ignores it. And that for me is the perfect vignette that sums up Jeremiah's life. He advocated constantly for ideas that were unpopular and was rejected for them, even though, as was proved to be the case, he was right. And as he said, Nebuchadnezzar did destroy the city and Jerusalem lost everything. But his ideas seem to the people to be compromise. I find this quite a difficult idea because I tend to take the view sometimes that speaking up for what is right, or right in my eyes at least, is more important than speaking up for what is the pragmatic thing to do. And I think Jeremiah challenges that a bit. That sometimes what is achievable and realistic is actually the right thing to do, even if it doesn't feel as right as the completely unrealistic ideal. When I read Jeremiah, I think it's easy to forget that he was speaking to his own people, denouncing his own people, not just arguing with them about politics and what was the right way to go in different situations, but proclaiming judgment on his own, on the people of Yahweh, of whom he was a part. And so he gets included in the effects of his own judgment. And yet there's this moment, very telling moment, in I think chapter 17, where he says that if he were to take Yahweh to court, he knows that Yahweh would be found in the right. And just that conflict, that internal conflict, none of this is easy, none of it is straightforward. This is absolutely not a case of black and white, right and wrong. This is a case of faithfulness in a very difficult situation, full of grey areas of ethics, of politics, of identity. Jeremiah perseveres. There's a few other things in Jeremiah that help us build a little picture of the man. So he's forbidden to marry or have children because they would be destroyed by the coming judgment, which I think is a very symbolic thing that he does. And he does this real kind of performance art as part of his prophecy. So he has a loincloth that becomes useless, chapter 13. There's the potter and the clay, chapter 18. The smashed clay pot in chapter 19. There's the cup of wrath poured out for all the kings of the nations, chapter 25. There's the yoke on his neck, chapter 27 to 28. He redeems a field, chapter 32. And then he throws this scroll into the Euphrates in chapter 51. And with each of these actions, a very powerful message is communicated. And for any visual artists out there, Jeremiah is an early prophetic hero. When Nebuchadnezzar organises the second exile to Babylon in 587, Jeremiah is given the choice to go or not go. And despite earlier on in the book saying that those who go to Babylon are the good figs, he chooses not to go. He stays behind to talk to the remnant. And despite advising them all against it, they flee to Egypt with him in tow. And it's just the most, just kind of this end to his life that just feels like it's a frustrated failure. He's a nobody, a nothing, nowhere. He's lost all sense of identity and as part of that people group. It's just a life of failure. And I think, what on earth could I make of my own life if it felt like that much of a failure? If I just stuck at something for that long for nothing, how would I feel? And yet that's what we have in the Old Testament's largest prophetic work. It's just a mixed up story of failure. It's peppered every now and again with a bit of hope for restoration. But generally speaking, it's a monumental failure. Jeremiah's assignment was as tough as they come, but he gave himself to it. If ever there was an inspiring story to give us the courage and the perseverance to stick it out in the cause of what is right, then this is it.